Taking as our subject theme the language of prayer. This is a mystical experiment in that prayer is an attitude of mind, and it's a sort of a moving consciousness of need, this sense of nourishment that we all require through the entire life. We are complete dependents on the weather, on the water, the elements, the stars, our parents, our co-workers. We are an interwoven fabric, and very complex too. And for that reason we can't go it alone. We're not expected to, and it's not good for us to try. But behind all this is a sort of a care system, a system which is being constructed over the evolutionary period of man's arrival onto Earth, where a sense of communication can be established. We're accustomed to watch these communications. The nicest one, I think, is to see the swallows on the telegraph wire waiting and gathering together for some invisible communication which will tell them that the way to Africa is clear, the winds are in their favor, food is on the way, and suddenly they just disappear right across the continents of Europe. An invisible communication which has cared for them and has drawn them back into suitable conditions. Migrations, and all the necessities by which birds know how to build their nests and what food to eat and what not to eat. A sort of a continual silent communication of information which is continually pouring in to the conscious life. And this at the instinctive level, with animals and so on, even plants and trees can all think. They are responsive to communications. And these communications are a part of the personalities. And I think if one tries to plant seeds in a bad temper, I'm not so sure they're going to grow. As if they're planted with love and affection, in which a communication is established between your life force and the life force of that seed, and then in that rapport you would get a higher creative effort. It would be a sort of cooperation. And this, I think, is a continual theme which runs right through the whole fabric of what we call consciousness. And in the human being, in his religious way, he's been rather conditioned by the elements to have a healthy respect for the tornadoes, for the thunderstorms, and for the wiles of nature. And he developed a sort of a superstitious communication between the various gods or nature spirits, which in his opinion were in charge of these things. And he went to a great deal of trouble not to offend them, and to make sure he did all the right things to keep them in a good mood. This is not such a bad thing. A little thankfulness, a self-respect. It's like in the East you find these little shrines with little piles of rice and a few flowers, all very simple but really very meaningful, because here is a childlike mind communicating to its invisible guardian or parent or God, in which to make themselves known and ask for favors. But when we go further into the deep subconscious of the human being, we find that this area of communication is considerably above the instinctive level, and it is a part of his psyche, a sort of a radar. If your radar is in good condition, then you have fewer accidents. If it's low and dense, then you find you run into trouble quite easily. One's sense of anticipation, one's imagination is dull. So there again is a magnetic psyche type of communication. And if we think of prayer and communication as the same thing, we can begin to see that this interweaving of the communication within life is necessary. When we come to such elements as religion, then prayer seems to take on quite a different category. Because instead of it being a natural thing, it becomes a sort of either superstitious or obligatory. Excuse me. But basically this is because the God that has been taught to the human race has been a wrathful one, an angry one, and somebody who was continually having a pair of scales and judging it all out and marking it all up, and it was rather a formidable thing. And the idea of prayer from the religious point of view was either to be excused from some of the sins which the humanity had manufactured for itself, or the priests, and at the same time partly superstitious, but on the other hand a very sincere gesture. And basically this sort of prayer is based upon the fear of the unknown, an area of abstract, where death is loomed and made much bigger than it is, birth is exaggerated. The whole drama of life becomes draped in this sort of hysterical praying, and even to mechanical praying. At least it's quite fascinating to see how lazy people can get with prayer wheels. And these are put on drums, and they're put on a suitable windy spot, and the wind will blow them round, and each time it goes round, according to them, they've chalked up a bit of karma. Their prayer has gone out into the wherewithal. And suitable prayers, even people turning huge wheels for hours at a time, with thousands of prayers all written inside. And the people would laugh at it and say, this is rather stupid, isn't it? It's very childish. Who's going to read those pieces of paper? Who's going to take any notice? And yet if you study comparative religion, it's practically one mass of prayer, but most of it, of course, has been organized. That is, it's been printed and laid out, and unfortunately we usually say the same thing for about 5 centuries at a time. And if I was the Almighty, I'd be getting a bit fed up with it by now. And this type of rhetoric, where we go through the book and say the right things, there's some beautiful language there. But a prayer or a communication is not a thing that one can import. It's got to be something very deep inside one's own nourishment, within the care of one's own character and nature. So I think if we could then see that prayer is really a sort of communication between the finer senses, the higher body, the lower body, and we all get knocked about a bit and scarred up and pushed around, that's life, but we're all old warriors, and occasionally we get a bit weary and we say, hi up there, can you just lay off a bit and let me get my wind back, you know? And I'm not so sure that that isn't a very nice prayer, because one's drawing attention to the great care system, that you've really had enough, you'd like a break, and you know, if there is any benefit going, we'd like to have it this way. It's a sort of a cadging, really, sort of permanent begging bowl of the Almighty, and it's more gimme than gimme. A collection plate illustrates that. On the other hand, we have this type of communication on a high spiritual level. And this is something very wonderful indeed, because it means that the consciousness of the individual has reached into a very deep zone and is able to really penetrate into the great barrier, and their spiritual links and ascendances are very highly developed. And this is where the Bible says the prayer of a righteous man is not to be despised. It seems as this ability to arise into a higher consciousness, and one can seem to take the prayers of people with them who couldn't penetrate this thing themselves. They're so bedded down in their own pain, in their own need, and they ask either the priest or the prayer wheel or the initiate or the seeker, pray for me. And this, of course, is a very wide and very deep and significant thing, because they're not actually appealing to the person but to the consciousness of the individual, the ability that they have to reach higher and wider and deeper into the great concept of need. This, of course, is where absent hearing is very effective, that those who often we have here ring out from all over the world, and in their different situations they are really bereft, they're lonely, they're frightened, they're afraid, and the nearest thing they can go to God is you. Their own prayers seem quite inadequate, they're not getting anywhere at all, and they do want a bit of push, a little bit of octane in it, I suppose. And they do approach, and this does work in a sense, in that ask and it shall be given is one of the mystiques of the Christian faith, but it's also in all the other faiths too, not only just in the religious one. So this seeking for comfort, for healing, for guidance, and for the mediator to act on their behalf, if the person is worthy, and the object is necessary, and the nourishment is needed, then wonderful things can happen. Because the environment of that person now is centered by a sense of warm loving, there's a sense of care builds around them, they're not alone so much. And the situation becomes clearer and decisions become much easier to make, because the whole area of their care system has been extended, and they've asked, and in their asking they have put themselves in touch with the great system of care, the love of God. So I think, provided that prayer isn't a manufactured thing, that it has a spontaneousness, then I think it's a useful thing to have. I noticed during the war that when men were really dying in great pain, there was only two people they asked for. That was their mother and God, nobody else. And I'm sure that cry of pain and that cry of need, right from the cradle of their life to the great extension of the unknown, I'm not so sure that cry is not probably the greatest prayer of their life. In that moment of agony, they have reached out and have touched some stick of force which has given the courage and the endurance to go on. So you see, we need this continual linkage with a higher life. We need this association with the angels, the guardians, the great stewards of the cosmic way, where it's like a sort of golden staircase, that it goes up into this lovely beyond. And I'm perfectly certain that not a sparrow falls to the ground that isn't known. Because there is an area of control, an area of order, an area in which all these requirements and needs have been foreseen. But with free will, unless you ask, and ask in the right way, it won't be granted to you. Because your free will is your own. And if you want to despise God, you can. If you want to tell the angels to go and jump in a lake, they probably will. If you just want to say, no, I'll go to learn, I'll fall down the sandpit and it'll be my fault. We can have pride, we can have jealousy, envy, aggression, which isolates us and puts us right outside the care system. All right, the angels say, that's how you want it, your prayers to be left alone. And we go and suffer our way into this thing, and usually we have to make a cry for help sometime and say, oh Lord, I am in a jam of a mess here. Is there any possible chance of having help in hand? And this, once we have the humility, the need, and the necessary conviction that there is a care system that surrounds the whole of nature, the whole of life, the whole of the cosmos, and we can appeal through this system by those who are in greater touch, more sensitive to the need, or through ourselves, through honest prayer. Now, I think prayer should be poetry. I think poetry should come into this at every level. I think God is a beautiful state of consciousness, a state of happiness. I think God is a beautiful state of infinite peace, not this horrible thing which has been manufactured by the medieval priests who use it with all the blood and sacrifice of pagan times, who hang people on a cross like about in the same regularity as we do Guy Fawkes, and call this thing holy. I think this is not poetical, it's not beautiful. And very often for pure prayer we have to go to the poets. And in that mystical language of the in-between they often touch a fragrance of communication which the materialist or the priest may even not know. And certain lines and certain phrases one repeats and repeats. They become classics very often. But even if you search in a poem and books yourself, one line can sometimes give you the key, give you the clue to an understanding that you found it difficult to express. So to my mind, prayer is poetry of the deepest, mystical, and the loveliest kind. And it has a beauty and a gentleness and a strength within it, which I think we could recover instead of this harsh, give me this, don't do that, get me out of this jam and don't let me fall into that one, etc., etc., etc. So now let's try, if we can, a sort of an intuitive prayer that would come, say, from an occasion, the occasion of a need. In our healing work, we place a great deal of value on the special benediction which each one of you receive. It is not a prayer of repetition. It is a reaching into your nature to uncover that part of your character, of your mind, your spirit, which needs some special understanding. And very often people break down and cry with their benedictions because it has touched the heartstrings. It's taken the cover off the wound. It has released the frustration and has helped the forgiveness. We can't go it alone. So once we begin to see then that this is not the chatterbox of priesthood, this is an intercommunication system between life and life. It's a beautiful, a lovely, a wonderful thing. And I think too it is a form of meditation. So let us here, if we can, take a message or reach into a sort of need. Say of a doctor trying to save a patient. Now how would this sort of come? As we tune into it, O God of man that tries to rescue the mortal life and restore it to its primitive state of natural health, that sees it bleeding and wounding and knows not which vein to cut nor which medicine to prescribe. Woe is me that my skill is so weak, yet God is so great and I know not of his mysteries. I'm a priest of God, or am I a doctor? Of the medicines of the physical kind, is there no mystery in me that I can give into this soul a consciousness to live, which is not of my life, but it is of my faith, that he will survive with the love of God. Well, let us try a prayer for a person who has lost a loved one, and let's see how this sort of comes. O love that's lost in the empty shell of a figure well known yet gone before, whose human presence still lingers in the things that you used, in the photographs, the clothes, the door, the noise of the footsteps. Are these all gone? Melodious is death to those who have died, but cruel to those who survive. Have we the self-pity that we mourn for their release, that we cry for our own sorrow and reach up not to their joy? Quiet, quiet then be the breath that it cries and sobs, that may look upwards to a rainbow, and see as it strikes the earth, it is a soul that has come down and returned. It is an angel of heaven in whom we've lived a while, and has gone on, who will wait for us at the next turnstile, if we have the gentle faith and the love of their passing. Now let us see what a prayer for one who is ill or sick, now within their own special grace. Lord, my soul is empty and my mind is a waste. I know not which way to turn in my own incompatibility. I quest in the wilderness, yet cannot find that strength which is better than my own, in which to fulfill and climb again upon the great wheel of life and take up my responsibilities in their true depth. Lord, I have wandered from my way and my own pride and my own fancy, and I have brought unto myself my own fears. Lead me into the company of the holy ones, that this reassurance within the depths of my hunger, the fear that strikes my heart, and the indecision which is in my thoughts, may these gather a new strength and a momentum, and rise up out of the darkness of their own sinking, and reach again to the heights, to where it belongs. Let us think here of a prayer that would be for a mother whose child was ill and sick, all upon the threshold of death in the middle of night, and no one at hand, and fear would grip the heart of the mother's loss as she saw the sweat and the tears of a body of her own. And in the silence of an empty night, when no one's near and the temperature low, the crying child in its fretful pain reaches out a hand and yet knows not which one to grasp. Side by side in that loneliness, a mother's cry goes out to that invisible area we call God, and calls in their note of fear and anxiety, "Save my child." No priest, no doctor is at hand, but only the prayer of the mother that said, "God save us, you are all we have." Now let us see if we can use a communication of prayer to a person in their own special need. I'll take you. Far beyond when my limbs were strong and my mind was agile, I was prosperous in my own career and found a satisfaction in sharing and giving. Part of a family which was far away yet not ever near, alone yet in a crowd, and always just a little afraid. Life seemed big. Life seemed just too far up. Sometimes you felt inadequate and very alone. You'd walk into a church and kneel at a pew and try to find God on a man-made altar. You'd walk into the garden and see the flowers, and yet the blooms were not as they were before, because death had knocked upon your door and taken away a life, and left you lonely, and you thought that God did not know. Yet in a new fellowship of understanding, where the goal of life narrowed down into a simple pattern of quiet care and gentle living, you are now learning to be at peace. Understand that? You don't have to bother with some of it. This is not a message. If you'd listened, the thing is, when you tune into the heart of a person, you pray to the heart of the individual.
I didn't understand about the lost one.
Well, we'll leave that. We won't go into that part. It's a way back. It's a way back. Yes, well, it's a way back. Now, the other part of this is that there are other ways in which we can find needs which we don't even know ourselves. We'll take you as a personal example. Now, you are in tune with me, aren't you? You're looking at me, and we are linking together. This is an intermediate thing. When you traveled the 7 seas in life's quest to find a partner which was not of your own, and yet you sought the rainbow's end, from the heat to the cold, never quite knew what was best, always seeking that which was beyond the horizon, yet knowing that each one was lost before it was found. And in your journeys of the soul and the mind, you express the experience of God in love and God in work. And often you were lonely and very much in some strange despair. And not until a life joined your life, not until a hand put its hand on the tiller of your own love and needs, only then did God come into your life fully. See, this type of communication is a thing that each of you can do within yourself. We're not trying to be authentic. We're not trying to dig up your past or be clairvoyant or anything stupid or silly like that. A prayer is something between the heart of you and the heart of the universe. It must have a depth, a passion, a simplicity. Now, Mr. Kidney, we'll have one for you, shall we? Lord, I labored through my many years to give unto others that which I had not myself. I labored so hard and gave so much that I myself became an excessive giver and suffered in my giving because few understood my heart. I sought to be successful in a world of competition that gave one an inferiority and a complex, yet in your heart was a courage and a bravery that you did not know. You turned and tuned into it for hours on end and years at a time, never realizing that you were using the compassion of your heart. At the same time, you persecuted yourself with your own need. And this is a state of hunger that must exhaust and tire. Soon one day the soul must come home to itself and be unto itself its own fountain, and find a harmony of an inner peace, a deep satisfaction, a confidence, and a love so profound that it will never let you go and uphold you in safety and in kindness and care and freedom. These are thoughts. So when we speak of communication, we realize that it is capable of tuning in to the life energy of a person. And this is where perhaps the poets and the sages, they touch certain levels of consciousness to which we are totally unaware. And it is this unawareness which is so startling. All at once it leaps out at us from the very pages. Something that has been right in front of us all our lives, but until it has been put in some way, into some form, shape, only then could we absorb it. So let us see if we can get rid of your tears. And there's one behind you. Not you, one behind you. Put your hand down there. That's it. No, not you, the one behind you. In all that I tried to do, I tried to give so much that I overgave within myself, and thereby used up the treasures that God had given me in health, in stamina, and in understanding. For these are the coinages that God has given that we must use as a sort of currency of heaven, very wisely. You consumed your heavenly currency in the excessive need of others through the lack of wisdom in their discerning. For more are there to take than those who are prepared to give. And you put yourself into the great avalanche of the givers and overgave. But this is not a time for tears nor sorrow, but a reclaiming, a salvaging of one's pride, to be freed of any ambition of power or money, and to learn in another sort of simplicity a depth of spirit which can qualify you and heal you for the rest of your life. Now, does one feel that we've touched anything here? Has an atmosphere been created? Has an area of communication been formed? Because in that area of communication, you open up not one but many to the invisible refreshment that soul body needs. And White Lodge is very much like that. It opens up these invisible channels that we've closed up for so many years and perhaps even centuries, and we haven't opened them up to this fragrance, to this grace, to this great creative thing called life. And I think the sooner we take our tumbles and falls and come to terms with this sanctity of life, that it's continually pouring into us as a conscious stream, then I think the greatest prayer of all is gratitude. A prayer of praise and thanks that this vitality of eternity is nourishing us right past the mortal to the immortal, finite to infinite. It never stays. It's always moving and taken us on. So then let us conclude here then with a prayer to the infinite. That mysterious spirit which forms the petal of a flower and brings the fragrance of a dark grey soil and gives it the breath of life. That mystery which can make night and day and sunset and sunrise an invisible pageant that operates upon the fringe of our consciousness. Infinite, not far away, but the grace of God which moves over the face of the waters, that touches every aching heart and open wound, and needs and feels every moment of pain, and yet is not of pain itself, but that healing balm of the infinite which opens up the heart from its own sorrow and releases it from the dawn of its darkness, that it may sail into the ocean of its life. O infinite grace which moves upon the waters, that feeds every plant and tree and bird, O fragrant infinite which gives us eternity and gives the soul its continuity of birth in life. Again and again we return from the infinite to the finite and finite to the infinite, always through the darkness of the shadows. We move on into the great and lovely dawn of eternal life.